5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thunderbirds are go.
I'm just going to take a brief look at each of the new instruments. There are loads of detailed reviews and walkthroughs for all of them already, so I'll just talk about the things I liked personally and how they fit in with my workflow. So the musical sampling brass instruments couldn't be easier to use. You just load up the instrument and play. It's low velocity for short notes, high velocity for longer notes, use the mod wheel and choose your reverb, and that's everything. Here's a bit of the orb horns. And the orb trumpets. And the orb trombones. These are fantastic instruments. They'd be ideal for people just getting started with programming, because the sound out the box is so good, and they couldn't be any easier to use. But even for more advanced users, they'd be an amazing tool for layering, especially for more energetic writing, and also great for saving time, especially for working composers. Musical Sampling's other brass library, Adventure Brass, blends really well with the Orb series, and unless there are Orb tubers on the way, you'll need both libraries for a full set of brass instruments. Adventure Brass also has some cool features. A Niente switch, which I wish all libraries had. This just helps avoid sudden stops in the sound. And also a little extra soloist overlay for more clarity. There are some extra articulations on all libraries. There's 46, there's triple F layers and shorts, some for sound reasons, some which just help workflow, but you can basically just use the default patch to play everything. Most of all, these are just really fun to play. If you desperately need true legato transitions, Musical Sampling even offers a legato trumpet for free. It takes a bit of mixing work to blend it with these libraries, but it's one of the best free instruments around and definitely worth getting. And if you don't like ensemble patches, these instruments are so light that you can just set up a few tracks of the same instrument and apply something like Grumpy Monkey's Transposer to help vary the sound. This is a free plugin which basically just does the transposition trick for you. This is Lineage Percussion, ProjectSAM's new flagship percussion library. I only used the orchestral instruments that I used in that mock-up, so I can't talk about the whole library, but what I did use I really enjoyed. The clarity of sound is as good as any percussion library I've heard or used before. With the XY stage, you can bring the instruments close and hear every single hit of every single roll. The dynamic range is also amazing, and the features on the main page of the interface are really useful and really easy to navigate. Even after 2 years, I still haven't worked out how to dampen the timpani on my own percussion library, other than just artificially changing the release time. But here you can just click dampen. The dynamics can be controlled in a number of different ways, just by switching here. I would have liked all rolls to be set to mod wheel by default, but that's just my personal workflow, and it only took 1 second to change. The different articulations are clearly shown on the keyboard, and once you've got used to them, you can play everything you need with no trouble at all. The pitch bend sounds authentic, even when it's exposed, and there's also the option of detuning an instrument in the interface itself. This can be handy for finding a different timbre, but for more creative composers than me, you can open up a whole new sound world by detuning the instruments to the limits. For example, this Celeste. The release time is super easy to control as well, and there's even a built-in limiter, which can be useful for those instruments which overpower slightly at their highest levels. There are dozens and dozens of instruments, but I'm just going to point out a few things I found useful with the ones I used. The XY stage can save having to use reverb and panning plugins, and it sounds really good. I love that there are multiple options for the orchestral instruments, such as these snare drums. And on the snare drums, I love that the rolls blend seamlessly with the flams, meaning you just add an extra note at the end of a roll for an accent, as opposed to a single hit, which can sometimes just sound stuck on at the end. I used suspended cymbals as well. Nothing much to say about them other than that they do the job perfectly, and they have everything you could need from suspended cymbals. There are options for mallets, sticks and brushes, different hits and rolls, and some other cool effects. And there are 2 options for these as well. I also use the Piatti. Nothing to say about them other than that they sound great, and that there's 2 options to choose from. And Gran Casa, 2 options for this as well, and it's worth pointing out that you can adjust the frequency with this filter dial here, which could be useful for a bigger drum to kind of focus more on the lower sounds. And also I used bongos as a set. One really cool feature of this library is that you can combine instruments together to make an ensemble. Some are pre-made, like these bongos, but you can build your own, and the instruments are shown in different colours. You can also easily drag on the keyboard where you want them to play as well. So this is useful for the bongo set for me, because it's quite weird for me to hear a higher pitch in my left hand than in my right hand, so I just swap them around. If I started my template again from scratch, Lineage Percussion would probably be my first choice for percussion library. It's compact, really well presented, sounds amazing, and is super easy to use. It's got pretty much everything you could need for orchestral percussion, and it's also a great learning tool for those not so familiar with percussion instruments, with different articulations and techniques clearly labelled, and standard options for different sticks given. If you use Symphobia or ProjectSAM's other orchestral instruments, This should blend perfectly as it was recorded in the same place. And you can also try a few instruments as part of their free orchestra library. And as far as I know, you also don't lose any money upgrading from the light version to the full version with all the mic positions and instruments. The next one is Glissando Harps from Chocolate Audio. I'm not going to spend long on this. It's the best virtual harp I've ever heard, and one of the best virtual instruments in general that I've ever used. The amount of care and detail put into the instrument is astonishing, and you can see all the features in Chocolate Audio's official videos, so I'll just play a little bit of the concert and orchestral harp to give an idea of the sound. Even though Chocolate Audio were quick to respond to emails and they were really lovely and very helpful, from their website it looks like they're not actively making orchestral instruments anymore, which would be tragic because this one is up there with the very best of the best. A very quick look through all the features. Basically there are two types of harp, concert harp and orchestral harp, which do exactly what they say on the tin. You can choose piano mode, or if you'd rather, you can choose harp mode. Meaning you can just choose the correct pedals and then run your finger up the keys to perform a glissando. There are loads of different playing styles, options for different releases, options for changing the sound and effects, mic levels, and even a glissando engine, which I'm reliably informed is really good, but I haven't used it yet. I can't believe I hadn't heard of this instrument until I started this little project. It always seems to get overshadowed by the bigger companies' offerings, but it's absolutely definitely worth checking out. And finally, modern scoring strings from AudioBro. I've used nothing but Cinematic Studio strings for 3 years now, with occasional bits of Vista layering. So the first thing that struck me was the richness and depth of the sound, which is just a result of it being a symphonic-sized section, and it's recorded really well. Although, as the name suggests, it's geared towards scoring rather than classical writing. I think this is the first symphonic-sized string ensemble I've used, so I was keen to see how it sounded when playing purely classical stuff. Here are 2 little excerpts from a Rachmaninoff symphony, showing different styles. It would be hard to argue against modern scoring strings being the best all-round strings library on the market today. It has pretty much everything you need for scoring modern media, and the sound and playability are really top tier. There are phenomenal first chair patches included for layering soloists with ensemble for more clarity. Plenty of options for all standard articulations, including legato on things like trills and tremolos, which is really useful. There are harmonics, pits, and col legno patches. as well as pre-recorded runs for major and minor scales. For modern scoring, there are also effects and kind of aleatoric sounds, as well as ostinato engines, both for short notes and long notes. On top of all of this, you can combine sections individually for divisi writing. This can be done automatically in one patch, but this will come at the expense of legato playability. So if your computer can handle it, I think it's better to have a separate track for each string section. You would think that all these features packed into one library would mean that the quality suffers, but I don't think this is the case. Everything sounds great to me. It's really hard to know what to demonstrate as there's so much to unpack, and I've only really scratched the surface in this short mock-up. So I'm just going to show a few extra features which I didn't need in this project. One feature I think is amazing is this detune dial, which basically just knocks the sound out of tune slightly. That sounds like something you wouldn't necessarily want, but it can give a more lifelike sound. Because the higher up the string a string player gets, the less likely it is to be perfectly in tune because the intervals get smaller together. And luckily this can be controlled with a CC, so if you find that you're writing loads of high, short stuff, you can just increase this dial for an extra bit of realism. And you can also use it on long notes to create some cool effects. These sounds don't have to be completely random. You can change quite a lot of things in the controls here. And that's it. I hope you found something useful in all this. I'll put links to the websites for each instrument in the description. And if you liked any of them, go and watch some walkthroughs and listen to some audio demos and stuff. Yeah, I hope it was useful.